Hello, ladies and germs. Thanks for joining me. I'm Scott, and I'm going to be setting up 3 shred guitars today. I know it's not what brings home the bacon around here, but it's my personal favorite because I'm a lifelong headbanger. Maybe you guys didn't know that. Anyways, we'll start with the Kirk Hammett LTD. Kirk's from Metallica, and this is his signature model. It's going to be getting 9 through 42 strings with standard tuning. Next I'll be working on the Gary Holt guitar, ESP LTD Eclipse style guitar. That one's going to be getting a lower tuning, D standard, with 10 through 52 strings. And then last we'll do the Ibanez Prestige that has a bird's eye maple neck and an ash body. And that one's going to be getting 9 through 46 strings with an E flat tuning. We'll start with the Kirk Hammett from Metallica. We'll start with the Kirk Hammett, but I wanted to mention about the Gary Holt 600 that he's from Exodus and Slayer, and he signed that one there. And I mean, this is his actual signature right here. This is what comes on the guitar from the factory right there. And yeah, he's playing with Slayer now. So because Jeff Hanneman died, Gary took his place. And they're back. Slayer is back. But let's start with Kirk's. I like this. This one's actually lighter. It's kind of nice. We'll talk about the weights on all 3 of these too. The LTD Kirk Hammett comes in as the heaviest guitar of the 3 at 8 pounds, 4 ounces. All 3 of the guitars have Floyd Rose locking nuts, so we can get those screws out of the way. It's a 3mm hex. We're also going to have to loosen the tremolo springs on the back side of the guitar because we're going to a lighter set of strings and we want it to float and balance out. So I just kind of want to get to, second plate, third plate here before I even put the new strings on. I measured 4/1000ths of an inch relief in the neck with those heavier strings, so I know we're going to need to try to get a little extra relief by turning the truss rod counterclockwise. This one's kind of in the neutral position. It's a 2-way truss rod. Now I'm going to try to lower the action a little bit. It was at 5/64ths. Tension off the posts by pushing down on the wiggle stick. Sometimes I'll put a wedge back in here as well. But the one thing I didn't realize right from the start, the Floyd Rose locking nut is way too high on this one. So we're going to be getting to that. For those of you that tuned in on how to lower the Floyd Rose locking nut, we'll be getting to that here in a few minutes. Take off the strings first. That is also a 3mm hex. And you can see this guitar's been sitting around collecting dust because he has not been able to play it. The setup is so bad, he's basically been looking at it hanging on the wall as if it was a piece of artwork for about 3 or 4 years now. Get this all cleaned up and we'll put those new strings on. We're going to 9 through 42. Get those locked down. We'll be getting around to doing the intonation on these 3 guitars. Actually, I think the last one that we'll do is the Ibanez, and the intonation is good on that. But on these LTDs, it was a little out. Now we'll retest the relief and find out that it's a little too much relief. I got 0.10000ths of an inch now. Go back in and make another truss rod adjustment. But these truss rods are real responsive. Going from 12 o'clock to 11 o'clock will do wonders on some of these dual action truss rods.
We'll adjust the bridge height again here with these two posts. Those are also a 3mm hex. By the looks of it, we're going to need to raise these pickups just a and I usually go back and forth, flip the guitar over a couple times to get the tremolo to float parallel with the body. And the last thing I do is adjust the intonation, which is a 2.5mm truss or a hex wrench. After a couple seconds of shredding, I can tell you right now, the locking nut is sky high. So we'll take it off and we'll remove material from the bottom side of the locking nut. I've seen on YouTube some luthiers like to cut wood off of the nut shelf. The reason being is that I've seen enough headstock breaks in this business to know that if you take wood away from the nut shelf, you are going to compromise the structural integrity of the neck wood at its weakest point, at its thinnest point right under the nut. So I decided to do it the more exhilarating way on this stationary belt sander with 40 grit green zirconia, and I'm going to take off 0.5 millimeter in height. We'll give it another test run by shredding some more. Alright, we got her down to a reasonable height. Now let's take a look at the GH60. Gary Holt weighs in at 7 pounds, 7.7 ounces. Not too shabby. We'll remove those locking nut pieces. This one had 5/64 action on the bass strings at the 12th fret and 6/64 on the trebles, which is way too high. 16 thousandths of an inch relief. So I'm going to adjust the truss rod by holding the notched straight edge down on the fretboard wood and turning it clockwise till I can see a little gap up there between the 1st and 2nd fret. We'll put it in a little bit of a back bow. That way when the strings go on, it'll balance out and go straight. Again, this guitar is getting a set of 10 through 52, and it's going to be in D standard tuning. Also, a little bit of a difference here between this LTD and the Kirk Hammett is the scale length. This one has a short scale like a Les Paul, and the Kirk Hammett has a long scale like a Stratocaster. So this one's actually going to feel quite a bit more slacked when it's finished. Even though it has thicker strings, it's got a shorter scale and a lower tuning. So we'll play that whole game where I adjust the springs, adjust the truss rod, adjust the bridge. What this one doesn't like to... This one is a lot different in its construction and in its body route. So the only way I could figure a safe way to change the strings was to do it one string at a time. I'm going to be adjusting the intonation quite a bit on this one because it was pretty much set up at the factory with 9 through 42, and now we have 10 through 52. We'll get it where it needs to be. I end up with a relief of 0.04 of an inch on this one. And this one didn't have the lowest nut in the world either, but I left it where it was. It wasn't quite as high as the Kirk Hammett, but because it has a floppier feel to it and it has such thicker strings, it just felt okay. You know, it felt better. It felt good actually with a little bit of height at the nut. So these saddles were all a little flat. I ended up moving most of them forward. Some of the retaining nuts had to be removed and, moved up to the second position. There's always 2 holes underneath those saddles. And again, 10 through 52 with D standard tuning. Get the truss rod cover back on and we'll take it for a test drive. And now weighing in at 7 pounds, 0.8 ounces, the Ibanez Prestige. It's also the sharpest of the 3. It's got a bird's eye maple neck and stainless steel frets that are super sharp on the edges. So I have to do a little fret work here. This one had an action of 5 1/2 64ths bass side, 12th fret. 4 64ths on the treble side. I want to get that down to about 3 1/2 64ths on the bass and 3 64ths on the treble. That's about 1.5 millimeters at the 12th fret. And that goes for all 3 of these shredding guitars. That's a really good low action for a shred guitar. 3 64ths, 1.5 millimeters. This one had a relief of 0.10 of an inch. I want to get that down just a little bit. I like them all to be somewhere between 5 thousandths and 10 thousandths, but somewhere around 6 thousandths to 8 thousandths is probably ideal. I'll tighten the truss rod just a skosh. You'll see this one's of a different construction. That one's more like a Les Paul. And softening the fret ends, or dressing the ends of the frets, is a 2-step process. Right here, I'm softening the bevels, and then I switch hands, and I take off the 90-degree corner and I soften the bevels. So there's the 90-degree corner comes off, and then you soften the bevel. There's 2 sides of the file. You got a sharp cornered side, which is this side, and then you have a soft, rounded side that you use when you soften the bevels. And after I do that on both sides, all the way the full length of it, I put 400 grit sandpaper on my scrub block, and I just go the full length, back and forth, and just knock extra edges off the fret ends. So 400, 600, and 800 to get a nice feel on the ends of the stainless frets. Now going back and forth real fast with the sandpaper and that fret dust, that gray fret dust, it gets rubbed into that cream colored binding. So now I'll take naphtha on a paper towel and clean that up a little bit. And get some of that gray fret dust off of there. If there's a little bit left, what I'll do is I'll take a scraper and I'll scrape off the rest of that residue, but I'll actually end up rolling the fretboard edges a little bit, make it feel extra nice. Make it feel like my Sire Larry Carlton T7 FM flame maple. So this one's the same way. It had that real deep body route, and it was best to change the strings one at a time. I changed them by pushing down on the wiggle stick, and that raises the string locks up above the body. Here's the A string. Watch me push down on the tremolo arm. Right here, I'll cut the ball off. I'll push down on the arm and brings that above the body so I can get the 3mm hex wrench in there. D string, same thing. And this is what it looks like from the other end. I like to cut the string a little shorter than it comes. Put it through the post. Well, actually under the string retainer first, then through the post. Put a right angle on the string after it goes through the post and tighten it up. This one's getting 9 through 46 strings, and it's going to have an E flat standard tuning. And this ended up being the easiest to set up out of the three. It did not need any intonation adjustments and just barely need a little bit of adjustment on the springs. The main thing on this one was the truss rod adjustment, and that corrected the neck relief, bring it down to a more comfortable. I think we ended up with 5/1000ths of an inch at the 7th fret. I'll cut these string ends, get it put back together, and we'll give it a test run. But first, let's take a look at my newest and favorite shred guitar, the Sire Larry Carlton T7 FM Flame Maple. It has a roasted maple neck with a rolled fretboard edge, super jumbo frets. This one has some coil tapping, some single coil sounds. It's pretty cool. The Gary Holt didn't have a tone knob. Both of the knobs were for volumes. I thought it was weird because the bridge volumes was here and the neck volume was down here, which is like reverse of what you'd normally think. Thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. I sure appreciate it. Catch you next time.